Hello, hello. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you very much for attending this meeting. Today, the topic will be about the global market outlook first half 2022. Of course, the problematic that we have today is we are not sure where, or you are not sure where you stand in the first year or first half of this year. To be honest, it has been quite a challenging year, of course, with a lot of events, a lot of impact on the energy business. Even today, we have seen some news about the European gas market coming up and raising the price. So the idea was to say, okay, we are here halfway through the year, so let's see what has been happening over the last 6 months, and let's see what are the prospects for the coming remaining 6 months, and of course, let's put a feet also on 2023. So we are here today. The agenda is, of course, quite big, but just to recap and have you some, let's say, administration process before. Our next webinar is already planned. It will be on Tuesday, September 13th. It will be exactly the same timing. If you want to get your invitation, you have the link in the slide, but you also have the link directly in the conversation of this meeting. If you want to see the replay of this video, it will be published on our website. It will also be published on our LinkedIn. As always, if you want to receive the slide of this presentation, do not hesitate to shoot me an email at the address you see on the bottom, guillamejean@tobefirstconsulting.com. And of course, today or tomorrow, I'll send you back all the slides we use. If you have any question during this webinar, same story as always. You can just post your comments and your question directly in the conversation feed of this meeting, and we'll be pleased to answer them at the end of the presentation. So the agenda today is quite clear. First, okay, a small introduction of ourselves for those who do not know us already. Then just a recap about Project Smart Explorer database. And then we'll go to the heart of the presentation with the market news, Ukraine impact, of course, still giving you some update about what is happening around this topic. And then we'll go really to the heart of it with, okay, the project outlook, what we see coming. We'll have a global outlook first, and then we'll have a specific outlook for energy transition because, let's say, the devil is in the details, so that's why we have a specific focus for energy transition. So it's now 3:02, so we have left enough time for people to join us. So let's go and start this meeting. I'll start. Of course, Jean-Charles will come up at one point, and I'll pass him the ball. That's just a way to make the introduction. Many of us already know Jean-Charles and I. We are both engineers who have been working for a long time in oil and gas, and we are both. He was in ABB, I was in Siemens, and we have both been working on Project Smart Explorer, which is a database tracing all the projects of oil and gas, Petrochem, and energy transition around the planet. And what we do, and mostly we do with you, is to help you buy those information, buy those data, to help you extend your business into this oil and gas and energy market. Just about the database, of course, many of you have seen that, okay, for many years we have been covering the oil and gas, the Petrochem. We were used to say, okay, it's 1,000 projects covering oil and gas, Petrochem. And today, with energy transition, we have added this layer now 2 years ago, more or less. It would be the second birthday of this energy transition plugin into the database. And of course, it raised the number of projects to 1,500 projects. So that's what we try to cover. The scope of oil and gas, Petrochem is quite well defined already, quite well mature. For energy transition, to be honest, every month we are adding new application, depending what we see arriving on the market, where are the projects going, etc., etc. And we try to be really quick and really careful at adding the right piece of information. Being that, okay, many applications have been pushed out there. Some will fly, some won't fly. So we'll see at the end of the day what is really interesting and what is not. The scope is extending, but the logic is remaining the same. We follow those projects that enter at the pre-FEED stage. We follow them until the 6 months after the EPC contract has been awarded, meaning that we try really to position our information and meaning your teams on early projects, so you can make the job to go after those projects. Enough about the environment of this presentation and the environment of our information. Now going more, let's say, in the details of the market news. Here we are going to try to have, let's say, the big picture of the market. What are the big drivers that we see? Because of course, on the last 6 months, we had a lot of events, and not even talking about Russia, but even adding Russia and Ukraine on top of it, we have had a lot of events that have had a huge impact on the barrel price, on the gas price. Just to give you some figures, the gas price today in Europe is, for example, 4 times what it was 1 year ago. So of course, a lot of things have been happening. Still, some stuff is happening today because I don't know if you have seen the news, but some operators for Equinors are striking. Feel a bit French to say that. But of course, Equinor staff being on strike, it raised the price of the gas. So this price, barrel price, gas price are going up and down, going banana, and nobody has clear visibility on that. But it doesn't stop project investment. It kind of fuel this perspective of say, okay, for some years we felt like they were going to divest from oil and gas. In fact, all our society are organized around that, and it's mandatory for us to produce. One of the biggest way to see that is to take the market by the other end, meaning that we don't start by the oil and gas, but let's see what are the consumption of, let's say, the output product that we can make out of oil and gas. And here we plug the ethylene market, and you can see year to year how much the volume of ethylene is going to increase. When we started with this slide, it was in 2020, and okay, the perspective was just skyrocketing. We are a little bit critical about that. We were not sure how it will go up, but in fact, if we look at the figures at the end of 2021 and 2022, the perspective has been quite realistic compared to what the market is. So that's why we assume that okay, this graph should has high chance to happen. And of course, you see that from a market which was so small in several years to become so big, it means that it's really driving and calling for more and more oil and gas. Another aspect of this is that, okay, all the regions are growing, is also the price of all, let's say, the output product. And here you have the cost of the synthetic rubber, fertilizer, plastic, petrochem, and chemicals. And all of those prices have been just going up like crazy. Some of them were going slow during COVID, but all of them have been raising later on. Meaning that I know if we look in 2022, we don't have the figures, but all of them, if we take the daily prices, are just going to the roof. And we don't see any situation where those prices should go down because the demand of the market is really huge. The consumption of all those products is really huge. And of course, from one day to another, we can't produce twice more. So it means that the price are going to be the limitation and the buffer of all this consumption. Now, if we go to, let's say, the entrance of this market, production today of oil is a little bit above 100 million barrels per day, which is just huge. Almost all the country worldwide are running full speed their operation. Most of the country are, like US did 3 months ago, are releasing from their, let's say, strategical inventory some oil and gas just to buffer a little bit the price and the inflation behind. So we do not see any forecast that we have seen on the market is saying the same. The production and the consumption of oil should grow until the end of the decade at least. So which means that we should end the decade around 104, 105, 106 million barrels per day. And of course, that's a lot of volume that needs to be invested to be produced. So today we're in this situation, and that's a graph from Saudi Aramco, where we are at this little dark green peak to say that, okay, if we stop investment just by the natural effect of declining oil and gas, we'll have a production that will go down, of course, with a small pace, but a growing one. If we keep a level of investment of about 300 billions per year, which is a huge amount of money, of course, it means that our production and consumption will have this kind of effect, a small dome and then go down because projects are getting more and more complex, are producing a little bit less, etc., etc. So it means that even by keeping this level of today investment, we cannot match with this consumption needed from the market. So we need to invest even more, about 370, 390 billion every year, just to match with this level of production. And of course, most of the countries around are willing to invest in those projects because the world need it. For the gas market, it's a little bit the same story. This slide is a little bit complex, but I'm going to explain it. Here you had the forecast in light blue of the gas demand, okay, going up before COVID. Okay, so that was quite a linear increase of the gas market, gaining about 5% every year in volumes. Of course, in dark blue, you have the revised forecast following COVID, because it was quite a boom and shock on the market, especially you see here in 2020, where the demand for gas, of course, went down. But the gas market was quite flexible. In fact, we are going back to this, let's say, dynamic of 5% or even more increase per year, which means that the market has been swallowing this COVID crisis and is now back on track to grow. The gas market was growing. It was already in tension. Now, if we look here, country per country, the volume of production and exportation, Russia was the second player worldwide. Now, with the Russian situation, of course, it's getting critical because the market of gas is much, much more concentrated into the end than what the oil market is. So it means that the gas market will be in tension over a long period of time. The demand going up, and of course, the price will just go banana. So it means that also, if we look at really onto this gas market, we need to pass from, let's say, a pipeline. I'm speaking for Europe, a gas pipeline infrastructure of midstream to LNG infrastructure. So of course, it's calling even more project and more business on top of that. Just one slide to finish this part. It's called the bullwhip effect, and that's one of the key slides we would like to present today. Here you have on this graph on the left a clear indication of how much in yellow the EPC price and EPC contract have been raising in prices, in value on the last years. And we are in this situation today where in 2022, all the EPC awards are about 20 to 25% more expensive than what they were before COVID. So of course, it's a huge gap. Prices are increasing. Okay, you can see it from the raw material, but even from the service point of view, etc., etc., the prices of those contracts are increasing like crazy. And of course, all the operators know it. The engineering company knows it, so they know that the project they do today or they order today will cost about 5 to 10% less than the same project they will order in 6 months. Which means that today, engineering companies and operators are more and more coming in advance to benefit from lower price and also to avoid some supply chain delay and supply chain problems like we had last year. So more and more operators and EPC are ordering in advance because it costs them less, it's more strategic, etc., etc. It's also a way for them to secure their delivery time and prices. And we see them placing sometimes orders even at the feed because we are more and more into this business model of feed conversion to EPC, which means that they are able to place orders at the feed. Okay, it's great. As Jean-Charles will show, it's a wave of project that will come on the table. No, it has this downside, and that's what is called in English bullwhip effect, where in fact a small change in the demand of customers and of the market brings a lot of variation and requests to the manufacturers and to the suppliers. And here, depending the layer you are in the supply chain, you can feel let's say the actual numbers are, if our customers are asking for 5%, then the EPC will ask for 10%, then the following layer will ask for 15, etc., etc., which means that if you're at the bottom of the supply chain, you may see your demand just double. It doesn't mean that the project number and the opportunity will double. It's a little bit contrary effect where people will ask, will sign orders, but will cancel them or will delay them, etc., etc. So it means that it would be a project full of opportunities, but from these opportunities, they will be more and more risky. So you have to be aware and to be careful also on the one you are selecting. Jean-Charles, I pass you the ball for this part.
Thank you, Jean, for this presentation regarding the overall situation. And to continue to detail the situation, of course, we have to focus on Ukraine war and its impact in terms of threats and opportunities. Something, of course, we had the opportunity to discuss with some of you, but here we wanted to make a kind of overview where we stand today. Of course, we don't talk about politics and war itself, but on the consequence on the market. So regarding Russia first, this graph is showing in yellow the curve of production of oil in Russia as it should have happened if there were no war. And in black, you have the curve expected from different studies of the Russian production. And more or less, you can see that it comes down from 10 or something around 10 million barrels per day to 8 and maybe 7 million barrels per day. So clearly, Russia is losing ground. By chance, of course, this loss of volume is compensated by the price of the oil, of the crude oil, and that, of course, send us to this discussion if Europe should completely ban to buy Russian oil because of the war. And in fact, we calculated, just to make a long story short, that if Europe was not was banning to purchase any oil from Russia, in fact, the impact on the market would be so that the price of the oil would jump to $200 or even more dollar per barrel, so that at the end of the day, the revenues to Russia would increase under the pressure of the prices by the restriction on the market because there is no substitute available so much to the Russian production at this moment to Europe in terms of quantity, because again, as Sean mentioned at the introduction of the presentation, the global consumption actually in crude oil is running slightly just above 100 million barrels per day, which is massive, and to withdraw only 2 or 3 million or 4 million barrels per day because of a European ban would have a terrific impact on the price market, and in fact this decision should in fact benefit first Russia in addition to the sanction that would apply to Europe on price wise. So that's the first point. Second point, on the right side of the slide, you have a view on the gas market where in opposite way here, even though Europe is very dependent on the Russian gas, as you know, you can see that Russia is anyway shooting a bullet on his feet because those projects which are in the pipeline and which were supposed to increase gas production in Russia by 50-60% will not happen, and in the long run, the production of gas in Russia will also decrease. And with here in a long term some substitution which are possible, as we'll see in the next slide. So in fact for Russia actually it has a big impact, and except for the oil where the revenues are still extremely high because of the market price. If we look at now the investment to replace the Russian gas to Europe, as we said, we calculated that it requires about 115 million tons per year of LNG to be imported, mostly from USA or Middle East. And those 15 million tons per year of LNG require about 200 billion of investment, including also about 15 LNG terminals to be built in US mainly. Most of them are being already under construction or approval. It requires also 500 LNG carriers, because when you calculate the volume of LNG plus the time to transport this LNG from US or Middle East to Europe, you get a very quick calculation of 500 LNG carriers. So it's a massive investment. So if some of you are interested in this market, it's going to be a 10 years opportunity to come now. And next door to us, it's about 10 LNG import terminal, out of which 7 are already approved. And we believe that in 1 year from now, it should be 10 more import terminals to be decided in Europe. For instance, those terminals are based on floating storage regasification unit, this kind of vessel, which are connected near shore to the local grid, but it will be complete full scale of import terminals, which will be built in the next 5 years. And the last point, which is not so obvious, but which is very important for you if you are based in Europe, is the construction of pipeline to connect East Mediterranean Sea to Europe and through North Africa as well. So there are a series of projects over there which are very interesting, because, as you know, East Mediterranean Sea and North Africa have a significant reserve of gas for which Europe is, of course, very interested in. And in addition to that, Europe has decided to invest 210 billion for renewables, so mainly solar and wind, and hydrogen and all those technologies, as part of the REPowerEU 5-year program, which has been decided. So altogether, it's about between 400 and 500 billion US dollar of investment to be made, mainly both sides of the Atlantic, I would say, mostly in US and mostly in Europe, including the Mediterranean Sea. And of course, LNG market is going to boom with quantities of projects. You see the bar graph on the right indicating this LNG project booming in 2022, 23, and following years. Next slide. Okay, thank you. In addition to that, back to the oil market, we can notice also that some projects or type of projects are back in business. Deep offshore projects, especially, for example, offshore Europe, offshore and on the west of Africa, or in east of Brazil, on the coast of Brazil as well. Those projects were on hold for some 10 years now, and we see them back. FPSO is booming, so it will be series of FPSOs to be decided on months per month, I would say. And of course, shale oil and gas in different places. US, of course, as usual, but even China also. China is developing series of projects in shale oil and gas. So if some of you are interested in this market, you can go for it. And regarding energy transition, we'll see also some slight small changes on the strategy where energy transition is moving from renewables more to decarbonation, and we'll explain in more details in a few slides what does it mean. For carbon dioxide, we also see the market moving from sequestration to monetization, and we see how is going on. For waste, the same. Instead of waste treatment, we talk about recycling now to create value out of the waste, and from fuel to e-fuel, biofuel, or sustainable aviation fuel, which are also booming, especially with the last decision of Europe to invest massively on those areas. So here is everything is affected. This trend were already more or less in the air, but Ukraine war obviously is speeding up all those processes of transformation, and which require massive money, and of course will open quantities of opportunities for you. So if we continue. Okay, so regarding the project outlook on that respect, So you see on the middle of the slide the evolution of the capital expenditure extracted from the database. So in red, you have the petrochemical on the top. In blue, you have the oil and gas investment. And in green, you have the energy. And you can see that for 2022-23, the perspective are extremely high. And if we look at further down this pipeline until 2030, the market is well is rather solid. If it goes down after 2024 or 25, is not to say that the market is disappearing. It's just how it reflects the visibility we have on our side on the project on that period. It means that the further we look, unfortunately, the less visibility we have, but it doesn't mean that the market is disappearing. Again, it just reflects the way we trace the project, and of course, we have a better visibility on project for 2022, 23, or 24 than for 27, 2030. And so it's quite unique to see a so robust business pipeline in perspective on the next 3 or 4 years. And that also reflects with these indicators that we like to take, the centrifugal pumps, which is one of the items we evaluate for each project. And if we consider that there are centrifugal pumps more or less everywhere in project, and any kind of project, it's a pretty good indicator. And you see the forecast for 2022 and 23, which are sky high. And of course, maybe 30% or 40% of this forecast will be postponed or delayed to the following years. But anyway, when we look where we stand after 6 months in 2022, you can see that for 2022 and even 2023, we are above 80% of last year 12 months. Okay, so in 6 months 2022, the volume of business awarded for centrifugal pump, as you can see, is 80% for than 2021 12 months, and for 2023 the same, which confirm the bullwhip effect that Jean described earlier in this presentation, as we have never seen that, where 2 years ahead, the volume of business already awarded is that high compared to past years. And it confirms how much contractors, end users and contractors are anticipating their needs in securing orders to the main contractors and then cascade them down to the whole supply chain to secure price, to secure capacity of production for the project to come in 2023. And of course, it will continue at least for 2024 or 25. So that's where those graphs are really pretty impressive, because again, we never seen that in the past at that scale. Next slide. So now, who are the key players in this market? Okay, you are used to this graph again. I mean, in blue you have the international company like BP, Shell, Exxon, Total, the 10 majors. In red you have the national oil companies like Saudi Aramco, Petrobras, Petronas, about 100 companies which hold about 50% of the market. And in green you have the independent companies representing about 30% of the market. And so we see a certain stability. Anyway, we see some IOCs coming back to in business, I would say. Before Ukraine, companies like Shell and BP more or less were running out of this market to become financial or trading company, but not so much investing in production. They were trying to sell more their asset to get rid of all those source of CO2 emission, I would say, to please their board and stakeholders, which is not the case of Chevron or Exxon or Total, who have clearly confirmed to maintain their strategy to remain as a producer. But with Ukraine, clearly we see some operators like Shell and BP coming back and investing again. So all contribute, but the domination is clearly remaining on the side of the national companies and the independent, and especially regarding energy transition, where independent are leading the game with more than 40% of market share. Regarding 40% is just the same number, but it has nothing to do with that. This 40% here refer to the new business model. That's also something that we mentioned in the past, but today which has taken a huge momentum because again the end users want to secure engineering capacities for their project, and therefore they are not tendering the EPC contract anymore, but they convert the FEED contract into EPC contract. So far, the main motivation for end users was to cut the cost of the project, because you cut much more the cost of the project at the design phase, when more or less everything is flexible on the table of the drawing board, while at the EPC level, when standards and specification and vendor lists are defined, the margin left for EPC contractors to cut the cost is very limited, in fact. So there were already fundamental trends from the end users to prefer this new business model. But with the Ukraine war, it's in addition to the previous motivation, a way to secure capacities on engineering. And with a major consequence, you could measure on the graph for the centrifugal pump that the vendors, the supplier of the contractors, and then the user and everybody in the supply chain are now more and more selected at the design phase. And that's very important, which may be a very good opportunity for you, because you can upload, let's say, your backlog, or fill in your backlog with orders already booked at the FEED stage for execution in 6 months, 12 months, or even 18 months, with, of course, some term and condition to adjust your pricing and secure your margin out of it. But the advantage of this solution is that when you have a solid backlog build up at FEED stage, then you can, on your side, secure the material cost and the material supply in order to have a margin, to secure your margin. And we have some customers now who are even able to hedge in respect with this backlog, to hedge the price of their material. It can be steel, it can be aluminium, it can be iron, it can be copper, etc. And that's very important, because of course when you build up your price and margin and business model on a long-term price, you are not exposed to the spot market, and then you have a better control of your destiny, I would say, in terms of profitability. So not only this business model is interesting to capture project and improve your margin and your sales, but it also gives you the opportunity to secure your production margin at the end of the project. So here, yes, 2 slides to compare the evolution of the market. You will see it's very easy to perceive the changes. So here you have the picture of the project awarded in 2021. Okay, so they are represented by the green dot, while the orange, red, and the violet dot represent the engineering company. So try to forget those one for a minute and just focus on the green dot of this slide. So here we talk about EPC contract awarded for the whole year 2021. And on the following slide, you will see the same picture, but for 6 months, 2022. And there is no big comment to make to realize how the volume of EPC contract awarded in 6 months 2022 is maybe twice more than what had been awarded last year in 12 months. So it shows the dynamic of the market at this moment. And on that respect, the Ukraine war has not slowed down anything. It's even the opposite. I must admit that normally in this season, we see the number of projects being sanctioned slowing down during the summer period and to start again in September. But I can tell you that it is not the case today. We see every day, even though we have started to enter the vacation period, the summer break, the number of projects being sanctioned or moving to design to be implemented as fast as possible is continuing to come, and even the material cost and so on are not cooling down the appetite of the investors in the energy market. It can be oil and gas, petrochem, or energy transition. So regarding energy transition, first, to remind some definition we like to use. In renewables, we consider, of course, wind and solar. We also put in this category water in a way that water is mainly desalination, and today desalination is mainly related to wind and solar. Okay, nobody is thinking to make a desalination plant with a gas-fired power plant ahead of it. So that's why we put water desalination in that area, and also water desalination is also used for the water to be used for the hydrogen production, and so that's why we put renewable water in that part. For power, we talk about hydrogen or eventually nuclear with many brackets around it, because we know that all countries have different views on that. But the most important point is decarbonation, which is another world, starting with electrification, the carbon capture and storage, the hydrogen with all colors, same for ammonia and methanol. And also a new application we have seen popping up in the middle of 2021, which are recycling. Waste to energy, waste to plastic, waste to chemical, waste to hydrogen. Just to give you a figure, altogether the countries in Europe have paid about 5 billion or more, 5 billion penalties to Europe because they did not invest enough in recycling activities. So you understand that when countries, and those penalties are supported by the government. So it's our respective money, our taxpayer, as a taxpayer, we are going to pay those penalties because our respective country didn't invest enough in recycling activities. So you understand why now those recycling activities are booming, because those countries are not intending to pay again billions of penalties next year for the same reason, while we could take value out of those waste, especially, for example, for bioenergy, biogas, biofuel, sustainable aviation fuel. And if you read in detail the decree of Europe regarding the end of the thermal engines by 2035, all the newspapers have mentioned that, so that Europe is expecting that every driver will use an electrical car in 2035. But in the same document, Europe recognize the value of the e-fuel and sustainable aviation fuel. What it means that instead of dreaming that plane and trucks and plane or a train would run with hydrogen, which may happen one day, but nobody knows when, and even less at which cost. In the meantime, it's pretty easy to use synthetic fuels or e-fuel coming from recycling or biomass to run those equipment and transportation. And that, of course, a fantastic opportunity, because next door to you in every country, there is a project of biofuel or sustainable aviation fuel, well financed by airline company or transportation company of any kind. And they are excellent project using your equipment the same way as it should be done in oil and gas or petrochemical. Energy storage is the same. So if we compare now the bar graph of those two energy transition businesses, we can notice a major difference, or some major difference between those two businesses. When it comes to renewables, meaning, let's say, wind and solar, to make it simple, we can notice that this wind and solar project started years ago already, more or less 10 years ago. It came up and in 2018, it started to accelerate between 2018 and 2020. And since 2021, we observe not it flattening, it continued to increase, of course, but not at the same speed as it used to be at the beginning. And we all know all the barriers preventing, at least in Europe or USA, large solar or wind farms development. So there are some countries where those renewables find a nice territory, like North Africa, like Middle East, like Australia. More or less all those empty countries have no problem to develop a massive source of production of renewable energy by solar and wind. But when it comes to industrial countries, you all know that it's much more complicated, and it will take time before things really develop and happen. And it is obvious that for 2035, for example, there is no chance that renewable energy is able to supply 100% electrical car, for example, just because the time needed to develop those projects. In opposite way, decarbonation has a very different profile of business. It started very lately. In fact, it started more or less middle of last year, so it's a few months ago. It's nearly just 1 year ago, and here is booming. Is booming, is more or less doubling year to year. Will it continue to double every year? Hard to say, but it could be at least for the next couple of years, because here there is no barriers, there is no problem of acceptance by population. In opposite way, when you invest in decarbonation, the benefit is immediate, because you can measure immediately how many tons of CO2 have been saved by this investment, and therefore everybody is supporting those projects. It can be operators themselves, it can be engineering company, or it can be in communities, state, Europe, and so on, supporting this decarbonation program. So here decarbonation is a right now opportunity. In addition, using your equipment. Again, decarbonation, or most of the process used for decarbonation are using the equipment as you are, maybe with some certification required, some adaptation, especially for hydrogen, for example. But for most of the other application, it's well known, it is your technology, and then let's say there is no restriction to run into it. So if we go to next slide, and just to explain the mechanism and why decarbonation is so active, we tried to illustrate it by this strange green equation, where we say 1 + 1 = 0 = 2. You can notice that the first one is green. It refers to any greenfield project. If a company is considering a new project, greenfield project by definition, you also know that this company is not allowed to increase the overall emission of CO2. Okay, no company, no country, no city, nobody is today allowed to increase his CO2 emission. So you understand that if a company wants or is planning to have a new project, in absolute value, by nature, this new project sooner or later will add CO2 emission to his basic reference value of CO2 emission. So it cannot do it unless it also invests somewhere else in a brownfield plant to decarbonate existing facilities, so that in investing in a new project, the overall sum of CO2 emission is not increasing or even decreasing. And that's why we say 1 + 1 = 0, because only those new investments will only be allowed if massive investments are made somewhere else on the install base to make sure that the total emission of CO2 is not increasing or is equal to 0. And equal to 2, because for you, business-wise, it means twice more opportunities. And we could even say 3 times more, because first you have the opportunity of the project itself. Second, you have the opportunity of the decarbonation of this new project. Typically, take a LNG plant, for example. An LNG plant usually was made by a gas turbine running large compressors. Today, no question to use gas turbine. It will be electrical solution to drive the compressors, and of course it will be required electrical power, which has to be generated somewhere to run the electrical motors, to run the compressor. So that's the second point. And the third point are, again, as I said, the decarbonation, the investment, the decarbonation of the existing facility, to make sure that overall the decarbonation footprint, the carbon footprint of the customer is not increasing. So that's why you have 1 + 1 = 2, maybe 3, if you are able to identify all those opportunities as a side effect of the investment planned by a company. So it's quite unique. It's the first time in history that we face a situation. And so, as a conclusion, it's pretty rare to see all the green light aligned in the same way. The market is booming, so no problem on that. The challenge is to filter the inquiries because your desk should be loaded of inquiries, but the value of those inquiries is very different or should be very, very different. So you have to be extremely selective to focus on the one easier to win, but also easier to execute. And that's where things are getting more complicated. But that's why we give you some indication how to find them. And the second one is, of course, to allocate resources to this most rewarding project in terms of time frame, margin, and risk mitigation. And what we suggest is to balance your backlog between those large projects that everybody is working on, but also series of small or mid-sized projects which are happening all over the world, and especially in Europe at this moment or in North America, next door to you, which are pretty nice because they run on fast track and can provide you good margins at low risk. Regarding the profile of the players, as we said, is national company and independent dominating the market at 82%, that's for sure. But we see IOCs back in business, especially companies like Shell and BP, which were disappearing, and then back while Total and so on, they just continue as usual. The key point is to notice quantity of new operators, especially for energy transition. Those guys, they have no predefined specification nor vendor list. So if you are the first one to step in and propose your services, your solution, you get it. And that's the way where the business is. 40% again of the EPC contract are awarded without tender, so fee disking. So here you have a even better opportunity to secure your margins and your profit at the end. So the question at the end of the day regarding this market is not if it's going to disappear in the next years. Everyone understood that we need oil and gas and petrochemicals for the next decade. The question is how to decarbonate it. Renewable, okay, is coming, but in some specific region where there is no barrier or acceptance issue. But decarbonation is running full speed. It's a short-term business. Is very easy going. Just be aware you can find them in the database, and then you should make a good business. So